seeing that Barry got out of the way, that I have been 20 years in the Marine Corps, I would ask anyone else that's been in the military, please raise your hand. Promising was received Veterans Day, so thank you all for your service. Also, I just want to let you know that this talk, even though it's lessons learned from the Marine Corps, it's not directed towards you all. I'm actually talking to everyone else in the room. So I just wanted to put that up front, but everyone who has served in the military is going to be able to reinforce what I'm about to talk about today. Because unlike some of the other talks I've been in, I'm really just going to tell you some stories about my time in the military and how that has worked out to where I am today as a project manager. So, obviously, a disclaimer slide. Just want to throw it out there. I'm talking on behalf of myself, not the DoD, the United States Marine Corps, and all that. So, we're clear on that one. I'm saying nothing about that. Okay. So, what do I want to talk about today? First thing I want to get across to everyone is that military planning translates into project management. That is the key item I want you to take away. Also, 80% solution, something I love more than anything in this world, is something I'm going to talk about. So I want you to take away how the military can help you apply that in your lives. Also, proactive risk management. I am also a PMI-ACP. I love risk management. Hence the 44 risk PM organization. Something I love to just talk about and work with. So, who am I? I'm again retired U.S. Marine, 20 years. Did multiple deployments overseas, multiple training organizations. I was a trainer. I was all over the map for those 20 years. Currently, I am a PM and I am an ATP instructor for the PMP and RMP. Like I said, I love teaching. I love working with people. So how did I get here today? I think that's an important backstory on how does a U.S. Marine logistics officer end up a project manager teaching it and talking to you all today. So my story is pretty interesting, at least to a few people I know I've talked to before, that I was on a great track in the Marine Corps. I was a major at the time. I was coming off a great duty where I was in command for a 1-star general, one of his company commanders. Everything was going well. And the Marine Corps sent me to beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. Right? So I got to be in charge of a 20 Marine unit where we were in charge of a reserve unit that was spread between Las Vegas and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Everyone I talked to was like, hey, you're doing great. You're a shoo-in for Lieutenant Colonel. You're a shoo-in to get in command. And for those who don't know, command in the Marine Corps as an officer that's what you're looking for. That is like, you've hit the pinnacle of where you need to be when you get the Lieutenant Colonel command. Everything past that, even general, you're just adding some fuel to the fire on how cool you are. But at the end of the day, you want Lieutenant Colonel. So I'm at this job. I have a great crew. I have my second child. Everything is looking good for my life, my career, everything. But then an unknown risk happened. The best way I like to explain it, again, risk management, right? So at this point, I'm working out 2 hours a day and I'm gaining weight. I am struggling day to day to just kind of like wake up, get my body moving. Everything was just not working right. So takes a lot for a Marine to go to a doctor, right? So finally I go and I'm on an Air Force base. So I finally go to an Air Force doctor and he's like, okay, they got a Marine in here telling me like something's wrong. So they started investigating and that's when the unknown risk popped up in my life, which ends up, if you can't see it right there, the doctor had to draw a T, so I knew what it was. It was a golf ball-sized brain tumor sitting in the middle of my head. So they go through the process. A couple months later, I'm in UCLA, getting it out, and there's a residual risk that comes with it. Ends up now, I have multiple rare medical conditions because that tumor decided to grow around my pituitary gland. So when they took it out, I lost my pituitary function, which results in me taking multiple pills every day. That's great. So, like, you're like, okay, why is it talking about tumor in the Marine Corps? What's going on here? Well, it's because a couple months after the surgery, I'm like, okay, I'm in my Marine Corps mind. I'm like, I have to adjust. I have to figure out how am I going to get past these conditions? Because again, I won't lieutenant colonel. I won't be moved. But then one day I got an email that basically said my Marine Corps career was done. They were putting me on a med board and they're like, you're done, man. Everything's over. I had no plan. There was nothing. I was on a good track. Now I'm told I have less than a year to get out of the Marine Corps. And I was like, okay, what do I do now? And I only had what I knew, what I've been trained to do, which was a plan. And that's something we're going to go over today, is I sat down with a piece of paper, at the top of the paper, I wrote situation, but I got to get out of the Marine Corps. Mission, find a job, find a career, take care of my family. Execution, I had no idea. At the time, I didn't even know what it was called, but I created a Kanban board. I've been using Kanban boards for years before I even knew what they were called. So I started just like, okay, how am I going to get from here to the end state, which is a civilian? And that's what, again, turned to what I knew, military time. And then throughout this time, though, right before all this happened, my wife actually got her PMI. So I think, it was a blessing that I started seeing a connection between what she was studying for and what I kind of knew. And I started kind of bouncing things off of her. Obviously, I was helping her study, so I'm like learning a little bit as I go. I'm like, okay, this might be something to do. And over time, I decided, okay, I took a CSM course. I was like, okay, that's why I was like, okay, I use these compounds. Okay, like I understand this iterative processing, and let's jump into this. So I started studying. I also started interviewing, and that's where really what I want to talk about today comes from. Is from one of my first interviews on the civilian side, and why I'm talking to a lot of the non-military is in the interview. I'm not going to name the company or who it was, but they're like, hey, this job requires someone that can think on their feet. They don't need to be told what they cannot be told what to do every day. Something along those lines. Like, they need someone that can like just work on their own. And I'm like, okay, like, do you realize that the Marine Corps and the military in general, from Iraq and Afghanistan, like we're decentralized. It's a Hollywood mindset that the military can only work off orders. You need to tell me to move left, to go left. Like, my last assignment, my boss was 3 hours away from me. I ran daily operations. I ran daily planning. We have a term from Iraq and Afghanistan that really came out, which is called strategic corporal, right? That was to where even at the lowest ranks, individuals were making decisions that could have a strategic impact miles away from where any general officer was sitting. So therefore, I was like, I'm in this interview, I'm like, I don't know how to answer this question right now. Like, yes, I know how to think on my own. Yes, you don't have to tell me what to do every day. I can operate. I can do anything you need me to do. So what it turned into is, I want you to take away from today's mindset of military does not blindly follow orders. There's actually a whole process out there. Yes, we have discipline, which is the ability to obey orders, but there's a side of it where we're working in the unknown. Think about, I was talking to one individual about that when we were planning the Afghan evacuation. There was a lot of unknowns. There was a lot of information that we were taking in to plan. So for that, you can't just blindly follow orders every day. Instead, we work off a concept called commander's intent. Commander's intent is this ability for me as the officer to look at my Marines and say, I need you to get this done. Then they go out and they work to get that done. So, for all of us as project managers, I'm sure we can love that if we had teams where we say, this is where we need to get to, and then you just let them go do it. And if they reached a hard point where something was wrong, they needed to go left or right, they knew they had to take the path that got them to that end state. And that's the way the military thinks, is working off commander's intent. And this isn't a new concept. This developed in the 1800s. The Prussians, they're the ones that really started developing this in the Germans. Then the Marine Corps adopted it in what is called MCDP-1, Marine Corps Doctrinal Publication 1. Great document. You can look it up online, short read, great information on just how the military planning, especially from the Marine Corps, how we think. But I took this commander's intent process and I started applying it to what I do as project management. And that's what we're here at today, is I'm going to go through what I call 3 war stories. So obviously I see a couple of military people already smiling because war stories are just me talking about my time in the military. All right. And I'm going to use those to show 3 project management lessons that I learned during my time. Mostly 2 of them were failures. One of them was from a time overseas. And how those have, applied to where I'm at today, leading projects, and something you all take away as hopefully ways to realize that in the military, we don't call it project management. We just call it planning. We just call it what we do. It's just what we do. So I'm hoping to reframe some of your views of veterans. So we're going to go over proactive risk management, stakeholder management, and then contingency and risk relationship building. So first story is copying someone's plan. So we're going to go back. I was a lieutenant. I was overworked. Okay. This is typical lieutenant. At the time, Afghanistan was a huge push. We had multiple units over there. I was put in a position where I had 8 infantry battalions underneath me. So I was working with them, trying to make sure they had equipment, gear they needed to train. I also had to train a platoon to get ready to go to Afghanistan in a year. And on top of that, just the day-to-day operations, including I was assigned to run the rifle range. A quick, one day, you go out there, you shoot about 300 rounds each individual. It's a really simple range. I got assigned it. It was like a month and a half out. I was like, I will get to that when I get to it. Well, obviously time came up. I needed to provide what we call an operations order. Basically a plan, project plan, how the range will operate. I didn't have anything. I'm getting called up. Hey, we need this by end of day. Cool. I call a buddy up who ran the same range a few months earlier. Simple. He sent me his document. I did a control F and replaced anything that had his unit, put my unit in, take his name, put my name, put my safety officer's name, and we're like, all right, cool. Turn it in, didn't think anything of it. Right? I have a team, they're doing a lot of the work. They're getting all their set up. Well, day of the range comes up, it's like the day before, really the range is coming up. And I wake up, I look outside, and it is snowed in North Carolina. Now, remember, this is November, so around this time. So I copied my buddy's his order from a few months earlier, which was in the summer of North Carolina. So I got a phone call first thing in the morning that said, Lieutenant Parker, report to the executive officer's office. Now, if you know anything about the military, you don't want it. A lieutenant never wants to go talk to your XO, especially when we're at a regimental level and I have a lieutenant colonel. So I have to go up there and I'm like, yes, sir. He starts asking me all these questions about my order. He starts asking me, why did I put this? I'm like, I start making things up off the fly. But then he gets down to my risk list. When I'm there, there's information on heat mitigation. How we're going to make sure people have enough water and all these different elements. So quickly he realized I did not actually write that. And he asked me a very important question that sat with me for a while. I was planning to take a motor transport unit to Afghanistan in less than a year. If he couldn't trust me to write an operation order right there for a simple rifle range, how can he trust me to do that work overseas when people's lives mattered. And, he's the first one that said something that I say all the time. It's better to be proactive over reactive. And that's something I've taken away. And that's probably the basis of my risk management planning in life, is that we as project managers need to reflect on the real conditions. What is going on for us? You can use lessons learned. You can take things from other projects, but you need to do the work. That is what we're paid to do. I, as an officer, was paid to take care of my Marines. I was paid to make sure that they were getting the training they needed to go overseas. You all are trained to make sure, or paid to make sure that your plans are solid. You have everything put together, and you're actually doing a risk analysis that sits with your project. And you can't outsource that. I couldn't outsource that as a lieutenant. You all can't outsource that as project managers. And then planning is what builds trust. Again, he lost trust in me that day. And it took me about 5 months to get that trust back to him before we actually went overseas. So that was the first lesson that I took away. And again, I'm hoping you all take something out of that real quick. Next one, though, is a real fun one. General rejects the plan. All right, now I'm back. I'm a captain. I'm a brand new captain. I get company command. I'm in charge of 200 Marines, and I am loving life because there's no better feeling than being a company commander when you get the captain. We are supporting exercises up and down the East Coast. So again, I'm still in North Carolina at this point. And we get a new general. Generals swap out while simultaneously we got tasked to support and exercise on this side of the country. Still don't know why they didn't have California do it, but we had to go out to New Mexico and do a training exercise. Simple enough. Send a platoon out there. They're going to do what they have to do. Well, in that process, the general released a new level of guidance. That guidance was how he wanted things to happen, how he envisioned how we would provide the support, how we would do our jobs. So I did not read that. I just did what I had been doing. I was comfortable. We had done this multiple times. We were good. Well, because of the level of it, I had to go brief that general. And I was the first individual to get to go brief him since he took over as the commanding general. About 5 minutes in, he's asking me questions. I had no answers. Eventually, he stood up and packed up his stuff. He said, you know what? I think this side of the table, pointing to me and my people, need to talk to this side of the table, looking at his staff. He goes, I'm going to leave. You all do your jobs. And he left. I literally had the commanding general walk out of my briefing. The first time I got to brief a general, the first time he walked out of anybody, his first brief with the units, it was a word I won't say, but it was not a good situation for me to be in. But the problem was, I planned for the past, he was looking for the future. Something I think we all can look at today, especially like AI and all these different new technologies out there. We can't just settle on what we know. We gotta enter a level of uncomfortable. And that's what I didn't want to do at that time. But now I was forced to do it. My team and I, we had to jump back into planning. What took us about 2 weeks to put together, we now have put together in less than 2 days because we had to hit timelines to start moving equipment across the country. So we sat down, we did the work, right through his guidance, and I understood what he wanted, what exactly we needed to provide. In turn, we got the job done. We got everyone out there, they provide support. But what I learned then is, know the guidance, not just the task. All right? We all work in different environments, different bosses, different industries. Things change. We have to know the guidance of what our management, our stakeholders, what do they want? What do they need? Right? It's not always what we know, right? We know a lot, but they have the guidance. They have the direction of where we need to be. In the planning, though, again, we had 2 days. And my boss, the boss in between me and the general, looked at me and just said, I don't care about the perfect solution. I want 80%. And that's why I say that I love the 80% solution. Because even though we didn't get it all put together, we got enough to get the timelines approved, we got enough to get the general sign off, we got enough to get the ball rolling. Then that last 20% we cleaned up along the way. We got the names on the roster type deal, right? We got everything we had to get done. But definitely had to get over some hurdles, which goes into things don't always go right for us, which is why I like to say, align, revise, deliver. Things go wrong, a risk turns into an issue, or an issue pops up. Don't freak out. Something I love today. I've already told people I've lived the most stressful days of my life. So therefore, when things happen, I tend not to freak out as much. But I will tell people, align. Just shift your head back where you have to go. General walked out. He's mad at me. His staff's mad at me. Cool. Align back. Revise the plan. Deliver. Ends up, that general and I, we worked together multiple times throughout our career. We joked about it for years, actually. About 10 years later. In Afghanistan, we laughed about it. So, yeah, great learning present. Great way to learn is just learn from the failures of others. This is one of them. Don't let a general walk out of your Then last little piece I want to talk about is the Afghanistan contingency planning. So now we're fast forwarding again. I'm back in Afghanistan. My third deployment. So I've learned a lot to this point. I am now deployed with the special operations, and I am in charge of all logistics planning for pretty much the country of Afghanistan for the teams that we had on the ground. In this time, I get there, I show up, I'm the only Marine, which is probably the most fun you could ever have, is being the only Marine amongst a bunch of Army, Navy, and Air Force. But I was able to take some of these lessons learned from the stakeholders, because we had a new general that showed up around the same time I did. I read his guidance. I read it this. I knew what he wanted. And he wanted an expeditionary force. Mm-hmm. Now, for some of the people that are in here in the Army, they know the Army, I love them to death. They're not very expeditionary. Like they're big, but the Marine Corps, that's our job. So I started thinking, how can I help implement some expeditionary mindsets into what we're doing? Well, at the same time, I started liaisoning across the base. Mm-hmm. So I was in Bagram Air Force Base, and I started, working with what I call coffee cups, cookies, and handshakes. So I started having coffee with individuals that I knew that were important on the other side of the house, people I needed support with. I would randomly bring people cookies that people would send me from home to drop off at specific supply points, specific areas where I needed to make specific requests, and they always had 48, 72-hour timelines. But I would come in, have coffee, cookies, shake their hands, but I was always nice to them. Even when they rejected my document and I was going to get in trouble, I was nice. I kept a good relationship building. And that was the key that I learned at this point in my life, is I had to build a relationship. But I also learned from before that I need to do some pre-mortem planning. I need to think ahead. What could go wrong? And one day I was actually out I saw an expeditionary field kitchen set, which means nothing to you all, and then nothing to the Army guys I was with. But for me as a Marine, I was like, holy crap, what is a expeditionary field kitchen set doing in Bagram? One, because it's Marine Corps basic gear and there's no Marines other than me. Two, expedition. My boss wants us to be expeditionary. Let me grab this thing. And I made some deals, and I was able to take this expeditionary field kitchen set, put it away. Well, you would think okay, where are we trying to get? Well, one day, about 2 a.m, I get a bang on my door, and ends up that my headquarters, which was in Kabul, had been attacked. The suicide vehicle borne IED ran through the gate, blew up all the power, and blew up the chow hall. Or the chow hall that they had basically collapsed inside on itself. and which had all their water, everything like that. So now it's about 3 a.m. by the time I get my grips on what's going on. Well, I started capitalizing on all those coffee cups, cookies, and handshakes. All those individuals that I had been working with over time started going, hey, I need help. I need support. I need this. I need that. I went through, and things that usually took 72 hours, they were given to me knowing that the paperwork will come later on. I started flying in water. That expeditionary field kitchen set, flew that down there. They now had a kitchen set up. Well, at the same time, probably the most fun part of my career is that I got to go grab a forklift, I grabbed some forklifts and other stuff. And there was a lot that actually had a bunch of generators that I keep my eye on. And I didn't know who the lot belonged to. They had no signs. They had nothing on it. Well, we helped the gate, hooked up some stuff, took their generators. I left a good sign on it that said, Captain Parker is taking your generators. Please call this number. And I took all their generators and sent them down there. All right. So I guess they stole their generators. They didn't call me for 2 weeks. So I just want to say they're not accountable for their equipment. So let's throw that out there. So what I'm trying to get at here is that, remember when we talked about those lessons learned, I developed a risk register. And they didn't call it a risk register yet. They just call it a list of things that could go bad. And in turn, I was able to use all these coordination and all this work to help build trust before the fire ever started on that base. I was able to work with individuals and get things working, get things moving to where from the time that they hit that IED hit, within 36 hours, they had food, they had water, they had all the energy and all this things they need to get that base back up and running and do what they were supposed to do, be the headquarters for special operations in Afghanistan. So, which brings me to silent dependencies. One of the things that, like I said, is finding those linkage between what you're working on is what one of the key elements I took out of that, because, yes, I need paperwork to get this done. There's all these different areas of dependencies that we list. But are you actually looking at what links those dependencies together? I think that's something a lot of times people skip, is that they know the dependencies out there, but how do you actually link them together? Paperwork, people, right? Again, we were in a people business, right? You have to understand the people and talk to the people and get to know them so that way they know what you need, you know what they need, and you can develop deals and you can work through the problems. And then pre-mortems versus post-mortems. The biggest thing I had to learn when it came to this, the success story, is that I learned from all those failures before that I can actually look out ahead of time. Risk management. I can actually look out and see what can go wrong. So from those 3 areas, I want to link those together with how I got to this point where I was able to do all this work. And the big thing I want you all to understand when it comes to our military starts at 18. When I joined the Marine Corps, I learned a concept called BAMSIS. All right, it's hard to read up here, but that stands for begin planning, arrange reconnaissance, make reconnaissance, issue an order, and supervise. So at 18, I'm not even officially a U.S. Marine, and they're already teaching me how to write a project plan. How do I go through and do all that work? Arrange reconnaissance. If you don't know what reconnaissance is, it's basically a plan. Like, if you think about it, I'm looking forward. What am I looking for? Eventually, over time, I got promoted, and I started focusing on MCPP. Right? It's the Marine Corps planning process. The Marine Corps planning process is to build upon that BAMSIS process we talked about. Now we're really starting to get into a good linkage between what PMI has and what the military is using. You're going through the whole thing of planning, doing analysis, you're doing all the different issuing out orders, issuing out tasks, supervising what has to be done. This is how we put it all together. And then by 30, when I was on that deployment, I was using the joint planning process, which is a build upon, because everything I'm talking to you today is about the Marine Corps, but we all work under that joint operation planning document that outlines everything for all the DoD. So the Navy, the Air Force, I assume the Space Force, because they fall under the Air Force right now. But either way, like we all fall under that document that again aligns the PMI. There's also a whole risk management doctrine in the military. And I'll take it up right now. I have not found out who wrote this thing, but they had to like either PMI copied from us or we copied from PMI. I haven't figured out that yet. But someone copied down to risk registers, down to probability impacts, down to how you qualitative, quantitative, everything analysis. It is all pretty much aligned in part. But that all led to my PMP, obviously, at age 36. So there's a continuum over time. But a good thing for you all is that you can catch someone in their first 4 years, 18 to 22, they know the advances. Right? So they know how to plan a project. They just don't call it that yet. They're just calling it planning. They're just calling it day-to-day work. It's what we do. We plan. So my key takeaways, what I want you to know is veterans know project management. They just don't know that's called that. So when you are sitting in an interview with someone who's coming from the military, especially if they're coming right out of the military, I highly advise you to see if you can get a veteran in the room, someone that can help interpret some of the information, or at least understand that they know more than what they probably even know they know.
Yeah.
They just don't know how to interpret it yet. Which is why I also encourage veterans, if they're going to get into this field, to work on that PMP, because that PMP is what helped me really take all that information from these documents and put them into what I needed to know for that exam. So again, I really hope this helps reframe your view of what you think of veterans, that they're not just mindless drones that just do what they're told every day, but they can actually think, they can do things, they have experiences that honestly is unmatched in the civilian world. You know, granted, being in the civilian world, it's been, interesting. I work with a lot of great individuals. We do a lot of great things. But so in the military, you do things, and you do things that a lot of times have the highest price, which is a human life. So they really know how to use this. Military planning, hopefully you can take away today and just know that you can apply some of this to your day-to-day life too. On what I talked about from my stories and what I've done. And be proactive, decisive, and just remember, we're all human. We need to work with each other. We need to communicate with each other. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So